Greetings everyone, I am RSV. This is my first guide and I'll be going through the basic skills, the tech, the skill tree, intermediate, advanced, and gearing. Starting with the Force's normal attack. The Force fires out a projectile that does a small amount of damage and recovers some PP. The Force's Retem action is a 360-degree shield that protects you from all directions, and upon a successful parry with it, you will gain a stack of Elemental Bullet. Elemental Bullet. Upon a tech use, if you have a stack of Elemental Bullet, you will fire out an additional attack that causes damage and gives you a stack of your Elemental bonus. You can gain a stack of Elemental Bullet through the weapon action and not attacking a short duration after using a tech. Photon Flare. Photon Flare has two variants. Both variants increase your PP by 50 and last for 30 seconds. The first variant increases your potency of everything by 20%, and a second variant that reduces your potency to 90%, but reduces your charge time down to 60% of its time. Both variants have 180 second cooldown. PP conversion simply enhances your natural PP recovery speed dramatically. 180 second cooldown on its initial, and a 30 second pause when it is used in the cooldown regeneration. This skill has two charges, so make sure to never let this ability stack twice. Rest of Force Field causes your Rester usage to heal allies around you and allows you to use Rester at full health. Photon Burst. The Force's Photon Burst is simply a laser that fires in front of you and ends with a large portion of damage. Moving on to techs. Every tech has a charged and non-charged variant. Also, all techs except for fire have a tech option in the skill tree that enhances and adds an effect. We'll start with Wind. Wind has two PAs, Zan and Gazan. Zan is your AoE option, and Gazan is your single target option. The skill tree ability for this causes your uncharged Zan and Gazan to leave a marker on enemies. When you use a charged PA to detonate the marker on enemies, in the case of Zan, it will cause a massive AoE to erupt from all nearby enemies. Zan is your AoE option, while Gazan is your single target option. A charged Gazan causes the mark to explode for single target damage. Lightning. You have Zonde and Gazond. While Gazond is the AoE option, Zondi is more effective for AoE clearing due to the way that lightning chains. When lightning hits, it will chain with nearby enemies, causing the single attack of the Zondi to actually be an AoE. Coupling this with the fact that Zondi can be spammed really quickly, Zondi ends up overshadowing Gazond in every way. Zondi calls down a single lightning bolt. It hits a target and then chains. After using Zondi and Gazond several times, you will generate a lightning proc. On your next charged lightning attack, it will have a stronger effect. As I said before, Gazond is the AoE option. It simply causes a passive area where enemies take damage in, and the charged attack simply causes immediate damage in that same area. Moving on to Ice. Ice has an AoE and a single target variant. Bartai is the single target variant, sending out a wave of ice in front of you, attacking and piercing through all enemies it hits. It only hits each enemy once, however. Gibraltar is your AoE option. It hits multiple enemies, and both will cause ice procs to appear on the enemy. When the ice proc goes purple, however, you want to use a charged version of the PA to detonate it. Detonating this proc causes massive damage onto the target. You can have multiple ice procs up at once. Dark. We have Magid and Gimmigid. Magid appears to be the AoE option, sending out a ball in front of you, while Gimmigid appears to be the single target option, causing darkness to appear on the enemy and cause damage. The effect of darkness is just to build up balls that float around you. These balls cap at 3, and you'll get 1 per PA you use. Using a charged Magid or Gimmigid will cause the balls to spawn additional attacks. In the case of Magid, it will spawn up to 4 balls that attack in an AoE. These balls, from my experience, can hit a target a maximum of 2 times, while Gimmigid gains up to 3 extra damaging attacks on its charged attack, causing it to do more damage. Light, we have Grants and Grant. Grants attacks a single target with sword. The charge attack causes more swords to come out, and will cause the light effect. While Grant, when you use a single attack, will cause a sword AoE to appear around you. Holding Grants will cause 3 lasers to come out in front of you and attack what's in front of you in an AoE. The light effect is called Grant's Glitter. Grant's Glitter will cause additional attacks to happen on all your light techs, depending on the tech that you use, thus increasing your tech's damage. The Grant's Glitter effect, however, is not expunged when you use it, so you can keep using light techs, charged or not, during the Grant's Glitter effect, and the effect will not be consumed. You can actually reproc the effects of Grant's Glitter in the halo's duration, and this will cause the effect to reset, and the duration will reset. In my first recording of text, I actually completely missed the fire element. This is because fire is pretty unremarkable. It does not have a huge niche and is very underused. It does not have a skill in the skill tree to benefit it, and it consists of a quick fireball attack, a charge pointed explosion on a target, an AoE around the player, and a charged flame pillar. Other than this though, there isn't much going for fire. It has no support and is completely isolated, with barely any enemies actually being weak to fire. It is probably the worst element in the game. Skill tree. I will be omitting the Talis in this video. Let me know down in the comments if you want me to review the Talis skills and the Talis weapon itself. First off, we have the skill point for PP conversion. This simply unlocks the active skill. The active skill itself consumes 20% of your HP, increases your natural PP recovery by 600% at base, and 400% for a subclass at base, lasting 30 seconds. If maxed out, however, natural PP recovery for your main class becomes 700%, and natural PP recovery for your subclass becomes 600%. It still lasts 30 seconds, however, and still has a 180 second cooldown, or a 120 second cooldown if it is every ability use afterward. PP conversion increases the number of stacks of PP conversion. Simply, this allows you to have 2 stacks and allows you to benefit from overstacking and not using it immediately. Just do not stack it up to 2 times. PP recovery boost simply increases your natural PP recovery even further, by up to 200% for a main class and 150% for a subclass. Eradication HP gain recovers your PP when nearby enemies are defeated or down. The amount is 5%. Technique charge PP well up simply allows you to recover PP through your natural recovery while you charge techniques. Rester force field. This allows your resters to heal your party and allows you to use them at full health. Slow landing charge force. This simply slows your full speed while you use your techniques. Butter Bolt. This is the ice technique skill. This causes you to gain a ice sigil on enemies when you use it. The more you use ice skills, the bigger the ice sigil will get, up to 2 times. When you use a charged ice technique on this, whether that be the AoE ice or the single target ice, you will cause the mark to explode for more damage. Zombie Clad. Hitting an enemy with a number of uncharged lightning techniques will cause you to enter a high voltage state. This state will strengthen the next charged lightning technique, after which you are returned to normal. Zan Gale. Hitting an enemy with an uncharged wind technique will affix a vortex. Hitting that enemy with a charged technique out of the same element will activate the vortex, causing additional attacks. The type of attacks caused by the vortex change depending on which technique you hit with. In other words, if you hit with a Zan, you'll cause an AoE. If you hit with Gizan, you'll cause a single target attack. Grant's Glitter. Hitting an enemy multiple times with a light technique will cause you to temporarily be surrounded by a halo. While it is active, using light techniques will cause additional attacks depending on the technique. Activating another halo while one is already active will not cause the effect to stack, but will instead reset the duration of the already active one. There are no enemies weak to light in the game right now. Neged Sphere. When you hit an enemy with an uncharged dark technique, you can stack up to 3 dark orbs. Using a charged dark technique will consume all the orbs and increase the power of that technique by the amount corresponding to how many were stocked. Photon Flare. This skill point unlocks the active skill Photon Flare. At base, it increases your potency by 120%, adds 50 PP, lasts 30 seconds, and has a cooldown of 180 seconds. The cooldown does not apply while it is active, however, so it actually has a cooldown of 210 seconds upon activation. Photon Flare Short Charge. This changes Photon Flare to the second variation, where it reduces your potency to 90% instead of increase it to 120%, and causes your charge time to be reduced. This variant is specifically good for using light and fire techniques who do not have a bonus from using their uncharged variants. However, I would personally omit this skill otherwise, as it causes your Photon Flare to behave in a way that is undesirable for the other elemental bonuses. Photon Flare after PP gain causes you to recover a percentage of the PP you lost that you expended on text during the duration of Photon Flare. The max recovery from this is 100 points. Technique Domination increases damage dealt by downed enemies by 30%. Maintain PP gain. If you don't attack or dodge after using a technique, your PP will recover by 15 points. Rod React Advanced. Using a technique while guarding with a weapon action or successfully dodging with a sidestep will make you invulnerable for a short while. Elemental Bullet, successfully guarding with a weapon action, will add an attack by a photonic bullet of the same element to the next initial technique you use. Elemental Bullet Extended. If you refrain from attacking or dodging after using a technique, you'll accumulate elemental bullets. Note, this has a 20-second cooldown, but in conjunction with maintained PP gain, this causes you to gain more damage from not attacking for a very brief period. Rod Technique Hold. Sidestepping or using a weapon action while charging a technique will maintain the charge status. In other words, the next use of the same technique will instead have a reduced charge time, and it will not consume PP, meaning that you lose nothing from sidestepping or using your weapon action during a charge. Intermediate. Force counter strategy. Did you know that you can fish for elemental bullets in certain fights to increase your damage? For example, Force has very unlimited range and has no range bonus, so you can stand wherever. Use this to your advantage to stand in the enemy's line of attack to gain more elemental bullets and do more damage. Remember to use the matching element to your enemy's weakness. This allows you to elementally down an enemy, and on top of that increases your damage against them. Note, this does not necessarily apply to AoE circumstance where you can just spam Zombie and get the most value out of that. However, you can also spam Zan and get similar results if enemies there are primarily weak to wind and you can line up properly, but Zombie is less effort. Rotating PP Conversion and Photon Flare. You do not want to use these two abilities at the same time. Instead, I recommend pre-popping PP Conversion about 15 seconds before you do Photon Flare. The reason for this is you gain PP at the end of Photon Flare based on the PP that you spent during Photon Flare. So you want to have lost some PP during Photon Flare to regain that PP, so that way you're getting the most out of Photon Flare. Conversely, just don't use them at the same time at all, because Photon Flare does increase your PP by 50 points. Your elemental bullets are precious, do not waste them. Try your best to make sure that you are chaining the elemental bullets to the charge PAs and not wasting the extra stacks that the elemental bullets can give. Having mastery of this will ensure that you do the most damage that you possibly can do. Action bar stacking. Did you know that you can have multiple weapon palettes of the same weapon? And did you know that you can have them all with different loadouts? Well, now you know. You can also save this as a loadout in the weapon counter, so you can quickly re-grab this instead of having to set it up again every time you switch from Force. This setup is really handy and allows you to switch the element you're using on the fly without ruining your rotation. You can always have your primary damage dealer for single target bound to the same key, and the same for AoE. This can be really helpful and allow you to maximize your damage and allow you to have more fun with the class. Advanced. What subclass should you use as a Force? The 3 subclasses I would recommend for Force are Tector, Bouncer, or Gun. Using Tector and Bouncer as a subclass allow you to have more skill points in your Force tree, which can allow you to gain more PP recovery as a Force. Conversely, Gunner tackles it from the opposite direction, increasing your PP recovery as a Force, but not freeing up those skill points, requiring you to have those skill points in your tree. Since you are using Tex as a Force, Tector is probably the strongest bet here as it increases your photon burst gains rate by 20%, whereas Bouncer increases your down rate with Tex and causes you to gain a bonus if the enemy's parts are broken. I will, as always, add an honorable mention to Fighter Sub here, as Fighter Sub does increase your damage in certain scenarios. Should you combo a Rod with a Talis to use the Talis's weapon action? I would vote no. If you get stuck on the Talis's weapon action, you actually create more problems for yourself than you're solving. After using the Talis's weapon action, you have to use a Rod skill to switch back to the Rod. This can be a damage loss and is very, very key. If you do not remember to switch back to Rod, and if you're like me, do not use the weapon action on the bar or Rod, and instead use a keybind for your weapon action, you will instead use the Talis weapon action instead of the Rod weapon action, which will force you to bind the Rod weapon action just in case. I do not think that this is worthwhile, and for that reason I cannot recommend having the Talis on your bar. Because of Elemental Bullet being specific to Rod, and there being other bonuses that Talis does not benefit from, and vice versa, I do not recommend using Talis as a Force. You just lose a lot of value in the process, especially if you forget to switch back to Rod. Gearing. What's best in slot for Force? Well, the Relic Battle Verge, no doubt. Force is very PP hungry, and that puts the Battle Verge's potential above the other potentials. But if you can't acquire a relic weapon, what out of the Griega or Gothica series do I recommend? I actually recommend the Gothica series here. Force really benefits from having more PP, so the Gothica series pushes it ahead here. Plus, Force is a very beloved class for mobbing, so having the extra damage on a Gothica rod is more useful here. As for units, I do recommend the Gries and Giant armors here over Bios. Bios is an option if you don't want to use them. However, I do recommend using them as Force is PP hungry, and Gries and Giant give you the most PP. Here are the best in slot augments. Addy Def, Next Soul 2 or Rennis Soul 3. They give about the same bonus, honestly. Rennis Soul 3 does increase your potency by an extra 0.5%, but the extra PP is huge. Alt Secreta 3 and Gigas Technique 3. Here is a list of alternative augments if you can't afford or do not wish to use any of these augments. Technique 3, Ale Domina, Dread Keeper, Elemental Augments, or Mastery. I have been RSV. I hope my Force guide was useful to you. Here are some of my other guides, and I will see you next time.